The spacious mansion was surrounded by greenery. A fountain was making noise in the center, and flower beds were fragrant on the sides. Alfred politely offered his hand to Cloud, helping him out of the carriage. The boy looked around in admiration. This well-kept territory immediately appealed to him. He even thought that he would like something similar near his own home. The butler opened the doors, walked into a bright hall with high windows and, bowing, apologized for the delay, announcing the arrival of Lord Cloudburn.
The man sitting on the sofa with his back to the entrance nodded with satisfaction when he heard Alfred's voice. He had been expecting their arrival, and was glad that the servant had not let him down.
A young beauty in an exquisite gown curtsied elegantly and greeted Cloud, saying that she was glad to see him at the tea party she had organized. It was Tina Barbarossa, and she was clearly enjoying her acquaintance. Cloud's cheeks instantly turned pink. He began to stutter, trying to thank for the invitation and observe all the rules of etiquette. The speech was difficult, but he managed. Tina was pleased. Suddenly, someone invited him to sit down.
Cloud froze in surprise. Right in front of him, on the sofa, sat the Margrave himself.
A friendly smile played on his face, and he greeted the guest in a friendly manner.
The Margrave introduced himself as Karsa von Barbarossa,
Tina's father, and expressed his joy at meeting Cloud. Cloud, slightly wary, replied that he was also glad to see him. Siri was snoring peacefully on the boy's head. The four of them, Cloud, Siri, Tina, and the Margrave, sat silently at the tea table. Cloud felt as if he was being courted, and the thought filled him with anxiety. The air was tense as a string.
He was served a cup of tea and desserts on a multi-layered étagère, but his hands were shaking so much that he could barely hold the cup. The excitement was so great that he could not taste or smell anything. The Margrave, without changing his position, asked his daughter if she wanted to discuss something important with Cloud. Tina nodded. Cloud sat in a chair with a tense face, and Siri was happily snoring on his lap. An embarrassed Tina, looking down, admitted that she had a request. She wanted to touch something. This phrase completely confused Cloud. Cloud, dumbfounded, asked what exactly they were talking about. In response, Tina flared up and said that he shouldn't force her to voice such things. She considered it a prank. Cloud exclaimed that he sincerely didn't understand what they wanted from him. The tension was rising. Cloud asked Tina to explain directly what exactly she wanted to touch, otherwise he would never understand. Tina did not remain in debt. She screamed that his lack of understanding was causing her confusion.
A loud squabble ensued. Tina accused Cloud of being callous, he of being unclear about her words. The Margrave watched the scene in silence. Soon Tina snapped, declaring that she would not ask anymore but would simply do it herself, and reached forward. But instead of Cloud, she grabbed Siri, hugged him tightly, and closed her eyes in happiness. The dog licked her face, pleased with the attention. And Cloud finally understood.
He remembered their first meeting in the church and realized that all this time Tina had been looking not at him, but at the dog. Her attention was directed at Sentry. The shudder that ran through her body subsided. Cloud quietly said that he didn't mind if Tina wanted to play with his pet. The girl thanked him and immediately invited Sigrid to go with her to the room. She quickly disappeared, leaving Cloud alone. Cloud remained seated, feeling slightly offended. He, too, would have liked to receive the same hugs that his dog had received. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the Margrave, who asked him not to hold a grudge against Tina. Bowing his head, Karsa apologized for his daughter's behavior, noting that she could be abrupt and not listen to others. He promised to talk to her later. Cloud quickly assured him that he was only too happy to give Tina some happiness. Suddenly, the Margrave's face lit up with a wide smile. He admitted that it was the first time he had seen his daughter so open, and expressed his hope that she and Cloud would become friends. Cloud perked up and confidently said that he would be glad to see that happen. He felt that perhaps he could become closer to this family. Suddenly, the Margrave's voice became serious. He said that he wanted to ask Cloud an important question. The boy tensed up. Coming closer and making a threatening face, Karsa sternly asked what exactly was hidden in his guest's pockets. Cloud was at a loss. He did not know what to say, and stared at the Margrave with all his eyes. Cloud cowered in horror, his eyes filled with tears, and he could barely squeeze out a word. But the next moment, the Margrave's menacing face changed to a wide smile. He laughed loudly, stunning Cloud with the sudden change in tone. Karsa von Barbarossa, laughing, admitted that because of his position, he had learned to read people like open books and immediately noticed when someone was hiding something. He assured the boy that he had no suspicions about him. On the contrary, he was simply interested in what he had hidden in his pockets. Karsa extended his hand and politely asked to see what exactly Cloud had brought with him. Cloud nodded quickly,
and quickly pulled his find out of his pocket, carefully laying the contents on the table. The Margrave's surprise was obvious. In front of him were the claws of fire wolves. He took one of the claws in his hands, turned it over, and noted that they were in amazing condition, without a single scratch. A rarity even among collectors. Karsa asked if Cloud was planning to sell the claws in Egdaza. The boy confirmed it. The Margrave nodded approvingly. Such a decision was reasonable, since rare trophies can be sold much more profitably in large cities. But he had one more remark. Without further ado, he offered Cloud a deal. 2 gold pieces for each claw. Without waiting for an answer, he placed the money on the table. Cloud was speechless. It was a huge amount. He knew that an adult earned no more than 3 gold pieces in a year. Still confused, Cloud calculated that for 4 claws he would receive 8 gold pieces. The Margrave's generosity astounded him. The boy bowed and offered to give the claws as a gift, as a sign of respect. But Karsa sharply objected. He insisted on buying. According to him, if Cloud put such a trophy on the open market, there would be a hunt from greedy traders. Such a rarity could upset the balance of the market. He then added that, as the guardian of order on his land, he could not allow a rush to arise. He considered it necessary to prevent any upheaval, and himself proposed a controlled purchase. The naive Cloud assured the Margrave that there would be no panic, since he still had a whole collection of 30 claws at home. He said this sincerely, not suspecting how unexpected it would sound. Karsa stood silent for a moment, then laughed loudly, leaning back on the sofa. He called it incredible. Cloud, on the other hand, was perplexed. The Margrave, covering his face with his hand, continued to laugh and admitted that the boy had completely exceeded all his expectations. He added that what surprised him most was how well Cloud understood trade matters, despite his age. After all, he was only 5 years old. The smile on his face turned serious, as he said that he thought Cloud's skill as a trainer was exceptional. Cloud's eyes widened. He found it hard to believe that someone had actually thought highly of his ability. He asked if he had understood the Margrave correctly. Karsa, not taking his eyes off Cloud, repeated, "The skill of a trainer is truly rare, and only a few understand its true power. Most underestimate its essence." Intrigued, Cloud excitedly asked to share everything the Margrave knew about the nature of this skill. Karsa nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, silence reigned in Tina's chambers. The girl, sitting on the floor next to Seri, leafed through an illustrated book. The two of them seemed to have become part of the story that was being told in another wing of the estate. Karsa began to tell a story about ancient times, when a terrible dragon lived on this continent, holding entire countries in fear. In the room, Tina played out her version of the story, playing the dragon and Sisri the brave hero. At that moment, the Margrave's voice could be heard in the distance, telling how even the mighty warriors had failed to crush the beast. One by one, they fell before its flames. But one day, a man appeared who could pacify the dragon with a simple wave of his hand. He was not feared. On the contrary, the beast recognized him as something more than a threat. In the room, Tina leaned over and kissed Siri on the top of her head. Karsa continued. The man did not fight the dragon, he spoke to it. And as a result of the dialogue, an agreement was made that ended the era of fear. The dragon swore an oath to never again bring destruction to these lands. As a sign of loyalty, he gave the people his horns, which became a symbol of peace. The picture changes. A panorama of the city of Sorori opens before your eyes. The gates leading into the city turned out to be made from the very horns given to you by the dragon. Cloud listened with bated breath as the Margrave continued his story and revealed that the mysterious man who had subdued the dragon was the founder of the Byrne family. His name was Ixion Byrne. The action returns to the hall, where Cloud is sitting opposite Karsa von Barbarossa. The boy is shocked. He has never heard such a story about his ancestors. The Margrave, although he acknowledged it as a legend, believed that there was more truth in it than it seemed. He added that representatives of the Byrne family have been famous for their unusual abilities since ancient times. A view of the old but impressive mansion of the Byrne family. Karsa noted with regret that the family was not doing well these days. However, he firmly believed that their services to the kingdom were significant and undervalued. Then, with a mysterious expression on his face, the Margrave began the most intriguing part of the story. Cloud, without looking away, absorbed every word. Barbarossa said that officially in the Chronicles of the Kingdom, Ixion was listed as the possessor of the skill of Tamer of Magical Beasts. But in the Barbarossa family memoirs,
The story looked different. One of the entries mentioned how at the ceremony of receiving the gift, Ikexion, just by touching the magic ball, split it in half. Never before had such a thing happened. The Margrave noted that such power could not be a simple coincidence. This man possessed a unique gift, which had no analogs before. The name of this gift is Trainer. Cloud seemed to wake up from a revelation. He realized the significance of what he had heard, and magical energy seemed to swirl around him. Meanwhile, Tina and Siri hugged, unaware that the story concerned their mutual friend. Barbarossa reported that since then, no one had shown the power of the trainer, and the world gradually forgot about it. Suddenly, the Margrave spoke in an alarming tone, warning that if word of the awakening of such a skill spread, many would begin to hunt Cloud. The boy froze, standing up abruptly. Karsa approached with a frightening expression, addressing Cloud by name and extending his hands towards him. He knelt down next to the stunned boy and, looking into his eyes, asked if he would agree to one day become the husband of his daughter Tina. Cloud was speechless. An image of Tina in a wedding dress with a gentle smile on her face appeared in his mind. Cloud's face flushed scarlet. He could barely contain his embarrassment. With difficulty choosing his words, closing his eyes, he loudly exclaimed that he could not accept such an offer. Karsa was slightly disappointed, but clarified whether Cloud did not like Tina, because with time she would become even more beautiful. Cloud continued to tremble, and tried to explain that it was not about Tina's beauty, but that he was not yet ready to make such important decisions. Hearing this, the Margrave remembered that Cloud was only 5 years old. He thought that it would be worth discussing the matter with the boy's father. Cloud himself was still at a loss. Suddenly, gathering his strength, Cloud loudly declared that his parents should not be involved in this. He believed that such decisions should be made by the young people themselves, he and Lady Tina. The Margrave raised an eyebrow in surprise. Cloud, heated with emotion, continued to insist. He and Tina should have the right to choose. Moreover, he was not sure whether the Margrave's words could be completely trusted. Squeezing Karsa's hands, he decisively added that the question of marriage should not be decided by families, only by those it directly affected. The Margrave stood up silently. Karsa stood up to his full height and said in a serious tone that he considered Cloud to be an unusually insightful man. He respectfully accepted his terms. Taking a firm stance, the Margrave promised that as the head of House Barbarossa, he would do his utmost to earn Cloud's trust. After catching his breath after the intense conversation, Karsa suggested that Cloud rest and stay at the estate for the night. He ordered his butler Alfred to escort his guest to the prepared chambers. Handing over his personal instructions to Alfred, the Margrave asked him to be especially attentive to the boy, since he was almost like a member of their family. With a kind smile, he looked at the blushing Cloud and warmly remarked that he very much hoped that one day he would truly become part of their family. The spacious and richly decorated guest quarters greeted Cloud with a soft bed. Exhausted from a long day, he almost collapsed on the bed. There was a knock on the door, and someone's voice politely asked for permission to enter. Cloud immediately recognized Tina and allowed it. Tina entered the room with a beaming face, hugging a happy Siri to her chest. She happily explained that she had been so engrossed in playing with the dog that she had completely forgotten to return him, and that was why she had only just come. With a smile, she suggested that they chat for a while. Tina suggested that Cloud and Siri spend the rest of the time before dinner together. Cloud was slightly taken aback, but readily accepted the invitation. During their conversation, Cloud gave a command, and the small dog suddenly transformed into a huge dog, who collapsed onto the couch behind his friends with a contented growl. This caused both children to burst into genuine laughter. They laughed heartily, enjoying the unusual situation. Meanwhile, the butler Alfred, about to call them to the table, opened the door to announce that dinner was ready. However, when he looked into the room, he saw 3 people. Cloud, Tina, and Siri were already peacefully dozing, cuddled up to each other. Their palms barely touched, and it looked almost touching. Cloud's mind traveled back to the past. A month had passed since the tea party at the Margraves. The Byrne family home stood as always, but new questions were accumulating in the boy's heart. The whole family gathered around the table. The parents looked at Cloud carefully, waiting for him to speak. He intended to tell them about the meaning of his gift, Trainer. Cloud recounted the legend he had heard from Karsa. According to the Margrave, the skill allowed not only to tame animals, but also to negotiate with a dragon. The boy was shocked by the true nature of his gift. The father turned to Emma and asked doubtfully what exactly their son was saying. Emma calmly asked him not to interrupt,
saying that children love to make up stories. Despite his mistrust, Cloud felt he had to learn his limits. To do that, he needed to practice. He was determined. Later, at the house, Cloud desperately begged his father to take him hunting, even shouting that he would be baiting to help the family get meat. Father was adamant. Only experienced city dwellers, well prepared to face wild animals, would participate in the hunt. But Cloud assured him that he had a reliable ally. It was about Seri, his faithful dog who could transform into a real beast. Cloud insisted that he would be completely safe. For the first time, his father thought about it. The doubts in the heart of the head of the family grew stronger. He understood that there were fewer hunters, and Seri could really be useful. After thinking for a while, he agreed. But with one condition. Cloud must follow him closely. They went to the basement. Father Byrne walked ahead, warning his son to be careful. Cloud looked at his feet in surprise, because he didn't know that their house had underground rooms. A huge storage area opened up before his eyes. Bags, chests, and old boxes were everywhere. His father explained that this was an underground reserve, an evacuation site for residents. But there was something truly valuable here. In the center of the room, on a magic circle, lay a pair of leather gloves, surrounded by lit candles. Cloud was amazed. His father informed him that these gloves were proof of the ancient legend of Ixion Bernay. Pointing to the gloves, his father explained that they were made of dragon skin, and no beast could bite through them. Lord Ixion himself was said to have worn them. Cloud asked with interest what the expression, "the pearl of the vault," meant. Cloud's father hesitated for a moment, but then admitted it. The gloves were alive. Cloud stared in surprise at one of them, where an eye was clearly visible. The man continued, explaining that it was mortally dangerous for a normal person to wear them. The ancient wrath of the dragon still lurked within. None of the ancestors who had taken the risk had survived this audacity. Intending to instill fear, the father said that only a brave man would dare to put on gloves. If Cloud could do it, he would go hunting with him. But in his mind, the man was already preparing to stop his son at the last moment. Alas, Cloud had already confidently pulled them on. The father exclaims in horror, realizing that he did not have time to prevent the step. Cloud is genuinely surprised. After all, it was his father who suggested trying them on. The man desperately orders the gloves to be removed immediately. To both of their surprise, the gloves did no harm. On the contrary, they seemed to come to life, moving slightly, as if recognizing their owner. And suddenly, with a sharp movement, they began to drag Cloud away from the basement. The father, shocked, only managed to shout his son's name. In the yard, as soon as he ran out, he saw Cloud being dragged away by gloves. He shouted to Seri, ordering her to stop running. But the dog remained motionless. The man looked at her in confusion and understood. Cloud was talking to the gloves. Suddenly, an eye on one of them opened and asked, "Who is he?" Because the hand does not belong to Ixion. The father's eyes reflected his smiling son. He couldn't believe what he saw. Did Cloud really have a gift? The dog watched calmly, as if he knew everything in advance. Cloud greeted the gloves happily. They accepted him. He felt two effects applied to him, one to reduce damage, one to increase his strength and reach. His new gear had become his ally. The father still couldn't get over it. Finally, he admitted. He had greatly underestimated his own son. Cloud listened attentively. After everything that had happened, there was no doubt left. The boy was ready to hunt. It was at this moment that someone else approached them, asking what they were talking about. It was Elbhad, armed and serious. He asked if Cloud and his father were going hunting, and if so, he wanted to join. Cloud was happy to recognize his friend. While the boys were enjoying their meeting, Emma asked her husband if he had really decided to take his son. He just chuckled, saying that stubbornness was in Cloud's blood. It was just unclear from whom he had inherited it. Emma smiled back. The Byrne household was filled with the bustle of the evening. Cloud was cleaning his shoes and packing his things. Elgid was bandaging his hands and checking his sword. Everyone was getting ready for the next day. Morning came. With the first rays of the sun, the three of them, Cloud, Eld, and Seri, stood ready. They were confident that they could handle any beast. Somewhere in the distance, orders were heard. "Bring boa constrictor meat." The boys looked at each other in confusion. They did not know that such strange demands existed in the city. The mentors explained the rules of the demonic forest to them. They had to start from level 1. The boys nodded, the determination in their eyes only growing stronger. At the Great Chasm, they discussed the rumors. Cloud told them that the forest was divided into levels, each deeper and more dangerous than the last. It lay on a plain, but its depths were unimaginable. The friends unfolded the map of Sorori and studied the routes carefully. They were in for a test, and they decided to be extremely careful. The three of them stood there, holding hands tightly, with Siri perched between them, looking pleased. The lift slowly lowered them down. The locals watched, and Cloud, descending so deep for the first time in his life, felt nervous. The first level of the demonic forest spread out before them, gloomy and vast. Even their silhouettes were lost in its fog. The boys froze, realizing the scale of the upcoming test. They entered the forest. Cloud noticed how thick the air was, as if thick with a heavy fog. And Eri carried the luggage, and El Cid explained that it was a demonic miasma emitted by the monsters. Even here on the surface, there was too much of it. Suddenly Siri tensed, and so did El Cid, both of them sensing something in the shadows. In an instant, they were in fighting stances. El Cid turned to Cloud, telling him to prepare for battle. Through the thick veil of miasma, a silhouette appeared in the foliage. At first glance, a deer, but its antlers sparkled with electricity. Seri recognized it as a thunderstag, and Eld confirmed, "Such a creature cannot be mistaken. Alone? No problem. But if it is a herd," Elgod loudly warned that if others appeared, things would get more complicated. Siri immediately reported that they were surrounded. He ordered Cloud to take cover behind him. There were already several deer around, and their behavior showed that they were preparing to attack. Hiding behind Siri's broad body, Cloud tried to comprehend what was happening. He was at a loss. Why had his gift as a trainer not worked on the animals? Perhaps it was because the Reaper hamsters had submitted silently, and the deer had not responded at all. Cloud suggested that the miasma had increased their aggression and disrupted their natural contact. And then it dawned on him. He couldn't make eye contact because of the fog. He realized, without a look, there is no connection. In desperation, he screamed at Elkaned to step aside and give the curtain a chance to disperse. El kept his cool. He asked not to worry. He didn't just carry the blade for nothing. Today he intended to prove himself worthy of it. Lightning flashed from the deer's antlers, surrounding the trio in flashes of electricity. Elgad did not flinch. It was time to show what his mentor had taught him. Memories of training days surfaced in his mind when Siri lashed him with his tail from all sides. The pain was unbearable. He wanted to cry, but he endured it. Weeks passed. Calluses grew on his palms, until one day, Elzada parried the first blow. It was a turning point. He became a warrior, not an apprentice. Now he confidently shouted that his special gift was not just a way to cut grass, but also a weapon against animals. The thunder stag took off. Elgadid, gathering all his strength, thrust his sword in the direction of the beast, and it flew away, accompanied by a flash and a whirlwind. The pack fled in panic. Cloud watched Eld with amazement and joy. He was amazed. His friend's powers were truly amazing. But the silence did not last long. A rumble rolled through the forest. Siri screamed that someone was coming. Someone much larger and more dangerous than the deer. They turned, and before them stood a huge boar, with fearsome fangs and eyes full of rage. Its size shocked both boys. Siri stood before them, releasing flames towards the beast. Its tail covered the shocked boys protectively. The boar howled and disappeared into the undergrowth. Cloud and Elkond thanked their protector in unison. Siri assured them that he would not allow anyone to come to harm. But the forest was not yet calm. Angry hares jumped out of the bushes. There were many of them. Elvid fought off the attacks with his sword and asked Cloud how they should act. There were too many opponents. Cloud glanced around quickly. He was surprised that he hadn't heard a word from the animals since their arrival. No sounds, no thoughts. It seemed abnormal. He realized that they were being squeezed from all sides by the beasts and birds of the demonic forest. Eld and Seri were barely fighting back, but it was becoming clear that the situation was getting out of control. After all, his gift attracts all the creatures of the forest. They are drawn to him like a magnet. And that was only the beginning. Surrounded by wild animals, Cloud glanced at his gloves. In that moment, he realized that his gift was not a blessing, but a real curse. Siri continued to defend him, slashing at the boars with his tail and growling so loudly that the ground shook. Cloud felt completely helpless. No matter how strong his friends were, if the beasts grew in numbers, they would be no match for them. But suddenly he remembered. After all, He himself had sworn to become strong and useful. Clenching his fists, he shouted, addressing the largest boar. Siri froze in bewilderment. Cloud's voice trembled as he said the greeting. The boar paused for a moment, as if hearing something unusual, and then suddenly pushed off the ground and rushed straight towards the boy. Sari and Elbred screamed at him to run, but Cloud didn't move. The huge beast grabbed Cloud with its snout, and he hung on by its fangs. Elgood couldn't believe his eyes. Finally, the beast stopped, and Cloud breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, they looked into each other's eyes. Cloud and the boar. Solid contact established. They froze, looking at each other. Boar was as puzzled as Cloud himself. Eld and Siri watched in confusion as Cloud held onto the beast's muzzle, genuinely happy that he had finally caught it. This reckless act had succeeded. Cloud was about to stop Elpad from attacking when the huge beast suddenly shuddered, trembled, and fell backwards. Both boys were dumbfounded. Cloud was confused. He didn't even have time to say anything. He turned around to see the intimidating Sisekri standing behind him. The dog, standing by the fallen boar, growled that he would never forgive those who dared to hurt his master. Cloud was horrified. It seemed that the beast lost consciousness just from one look from Sari. Sari was at his limit. He wanted to give his young master a chance, but now he had enough. Elcod stood there, shocked. He looked from the fallen beast to Cloud, then to Sinuri. He didn't know what to think anymore. They were just kids. He thought he could run away at any moment if things got dangerous. But Cloud had risked his life. Hunting is not a game. It is a battle in which life is at stake. Eld realized how childish his reasoning had been. A wave of shame washed over him. He looked at Cloud and said that he understood a lot. From now on, no games. Everything is for real. Elcod and Siri took up their fighting positions once more, with a stunned Cloud standing behind them, watching their determination. The next moment, they both rushed forward at the same time. The beasts flew apart under the powerful blows. Sari used his fangs and tail, and Elg used his sharpened blade. Cloud watched their swift attack in silence, his heart pounding with excitement. He couldn't believe the courage with which his friends fought. Suddenly, black dots appeared in the sky. They were birds. Elbermad assumed that these were reinforcements for the animals and begged for help, but Siri did not hesitate. He accurately threw the boy up, straight towards the danger. Sari's thunderous roar created an updraft that sent Elgod soaring through the foliage. At the heights, he grabbed the hilt of his sword, preparing to attack. A skeletal bird with a terrifying beak flew towards him. Eld chuckled to himself. An ordinary person would not be able to draw a sword in flight, much less swing it. But his case was special. Elkid's memories took him back to the day of the revelation ceremony, where the priest had told him about the nature of his gift, hinting that it would not be easy to understand. The priest said that Elkinid's skill allowed him to do things that others could not do physically, and although his ability was called a holy sword, this name did not reflect the whole essence. Elkin was astonished by this revelation. No matter how heavy the sword was, in Elginid's hands it became weightless, and the long blade was controlled with ease. Returning his thoughts to the present, Elgid delivered a precise blow to the beak of the bird of prey. He felt how, with each swing, he distorted the laws of the world itself. The more he distorted these laws, the more destructive his blows became. A mighty thrust struck the winged creature down in midair. Falling after his victory, Elsad confidently thrust his blade into the ground to cushion his landing. This gift allowed him to be invulnerable in both attack and defense, the true nature of the holy sword. Standing amidst the wreckage of the defeated monster, Elgod held his sword in his lowered hand, looking absolutely unwavering. The battlefield was finally empty. Drops of moisture, perhaps rain, fell on the leaves. Sari was resting. Cloud and El-Kharid were carefully examining the surroundings. Joyfully, they discussed that all the aggressive beasts had been eliminated, and turned to Cloud with the question, what to do next? Cloud laughed in relief. Looking at the fog-covered forest, he suggested that his companions return home. In the elevator, slowly rising up the chasm, the boys sat side by side, surrounded by boxes and baskets of loot. A smaller Siri sat on top. Elb noted that the hunt had been a success. Cloud agreed. They were both pleased, especially since the adults helped them carry everything to the elevator. Smiling happily, Elsid said that the butcher would have to work hard today, since they had returned as heroes. Cloud nodded approvingly. At the gates of the Byrne family home, they were already met by people who admired their feat. Cloud's father rushed towards them in horror. All three were covered in blood, and he decided that they were wounded. Just as he was about to run for the first aid kit, he heard Eld's cheerful voice.
They were all right. The blood wasn't theirs.
Cloud excitedly confirmed that the hunt had been a success and showed a strand of the huge beast's fur. He hoped that he had been of some use to his family. The father silently took the lock of hair, looked at it carefully, and then suddenly knelt down in front of his son and hugged him tightly. He exclaimed loudly that he was glad for only one thing. They were alive. That was all that mattered.
Cloud was stunned by this reaction. His father added that he was proud of their achievements as well. Elgid stood nearby, smiling.
Emma came up to them with a basket and told the boys to go to the bathhouse immediately because they were all dirty, and today the bathhouse belonged only to them. Cloud, Eld, and Siri were enjoying the hot water in the spacious bathhouse. Cloud turned to Eld with gratitude. If it weren't for him, everything could have ended differently.
But Eld was sure that Cloud could have done it himself. However, Cloud disagreed. He believed that Eld and Siri had done all the work, and he was just getting in the way. Comparing himself to his friend, Cloud felt weak. Jumping up from the water, Elzid exclaimed that Cloud was very wrong.
With genuine excitement, El-Korat exclaimed that the man who was supposedly in the way would not have faced the large beast head-on. He recalled how Cloud had rushed forward without hesitation and stopped the beast, and he was truly delighted by his action.
Standing in front of Cloud in the hot water, El-Korat admitted that that action had opened his eyes to many things. Therefore, Cloud had no right to speak ill of himself. He felt his ears fill with heat.
Eld went back into the water and added that Cloud had more courage than some adults and that everyone loved him. He reminded them that he had had a great time hunting and he asked to be sure to take him with him next time. He squinted deftly and glanced at the confused Cloud. He thanked his friend for his help and promised that he would definitely call again.
Morning came.
The city market was bustling with traders and buyers everywhere. Among them were Cloud and his brother and sister, who decided to see how the trade of their loot was going. The people thanked them because boar meat was incredibly tasty and had long since become a rarity. The old man treated the boys and even Sayuri. He spoke with delight about the results of their first hunt, saying that he expected nothing less from the young lord. Cloud was pleased, and his sister said with a smile that the juicy meat on their table was thanks only to him.
A carriage drove through the city gates.
As soon as they started talking about meat, buyers appeared. The carriage was luxurious, drawn by thoroughbred horses. One of the men introduced himself as a merchant, who had come on behalf of Margrave Varunai.
The man showed a pendant as a sign of status. He used to be a simple merchant, but now specialized in selling monster meat to the aristocracy. He came to buy boar meat now. Next to him stood a short man in a black robe. Cloud became wary. Something about what was happening was troubling him. The mysterious cloaked companion was suspicious, and crows were flying from the rooftops, as if sensing a storm was coming. There were too many of them.
The visiting merchant approached the boxes of meat and began negotiations. On one side stood he and his assistant. On the other, Cloud with his brother, sister, and the local merchant. The visitor announced the price.
17.35 silver coins per square meter, and they had 45 squares.
Then, with an arrogant look, he declared that he was willing to pay only 5 gold coins for the entire batch. Cloud was taken aback by such impudence. He tried to object, reminding them of the price per unit. And suddenly, someone's voice from the side announced the exact amount. 780.75 silver coins.
Cloud turned around. It was his younger sister, Sally. She confidently counted and said that the meat was worth 7 gold, 80 silver, and 75 copper, or 8 gold if you round it up. Cloud was shocked. Sally was only 3.5 years old. He proudly announced to the stranger that the price was 8 gold and they would not back down. The local merchant froze.
An argument broke out between Cloud and a local merchant named Kellen, one arguing for a fair price, the other for caution. Cloud insisted that Kellen had no right to sell the meat so cheaply, knowing its market value. Kellen replied that he had been doing business with this newcomer for many years. Cloud countered that he was not overcharging, but asking only for fair payment, and did not understand why Kellen was silent about the unequal conditions. Kellen remembered the day he refused to sell to this man and his mysterious companion. He had no idea how it would turn out.
A giant bird suddenly appeared over the city with a flock of smaller ones.
It fell on the roofs, damaged the buildings, and took all the meat. Kellen barely managed to escape the destruction. Cloud, having listened to the story, came to the conclusion that the visitor was manipulating the bird in order to rob people. Kellen did not believe it. After all, it was impossible to tame such a creature. From then on, he did not object to the merchant. Cloud eyed the newcomer and his companion suspiciously, feeling a growing sense of distrust. He thought of a plan, smiled slyly, and decided it was time to put his powers to good use. Addressing the merchant by name, he said he had made his decision.
Standing by the meat crates, Cloud calmly but firmly stated that the price was 8 gold. If these two couldn't pay, there would be others. The stranger's face twisted in anger.
Then he arrogantly showed the medallion and asked if the heir of the Byrne family knew what this sign was. It gives the right to free trade in these lands, and no one can drive him away. Without changing his arrogant tone, the stranger continued to press Cloud, assuring him that by doing so he was incurring the Margrave's wrath. He demanded confirmation of his conviction. Everyone in the square, Kellen, Cloud's brother and sister, were tensely awaiting his answer. Suddenly, with exaggerated politeness, Cloud remarked that he could not sell such valuable meat to such a poor and useless merchant.
The stranger's face froze.
Kellen stood frozen in horror, fearing the consequences, while Cloud's siblings were delighted. The newcomer, smiling tensely, announced that they were leaving. Standing next to his cloaked companion, he added emphatically that being rude to a merchant approved by the Margrave was a path to destruction. He looked at Cloud with regret and expressed concern about what future awaited the Byrne family with such an heir. After these words, he leaned towards his companion and whispered something. The latter slowly raised his head, and a strange, almost insane expression was reflected on his face. A monstrous roar sounded above the city gates in the clear sky. It seemed as if something ancient and terrible was approaching Sorori. Cloud squinted. The rhythm resembled the flapping of giant wings. Beside him, Kellen froze in horror. Then, raising his head, he shouted that she had returned. A huge bird appeared in the sky, the legendary rock. Dozens of smaller blackbirds scurried around it. Cloud froze, looking at the ominous figure above the city. On the roof of one of the houses stood a figure in a black cloak, the same companion of the visitor. His face was distorted by a mad grin. Everything indicated that the nightmare was repeating itself. From the heights, a view of Sorori opened up. The city was shaking under the weight of the attack. The rockbird circled in the sky, and its shadow covered the streets.
Kellen screamed in panic that it was the Robosic bird and that he shouldn't have crossed that merchant. Cloud watched the creature approach, its blazing eyes blazing with fury. The thought flashed through the boy's mind. The bird attacked, its talons clawing at the rooftops. Roof tiles and bricks fell from the sky. People ran in panic, trying to escape. Cloud ordered Siri to protect the people in the square. The dragon dog immediately rushed forward.
Taking on an enlarged form, Siri shielded the crowd with his body. But the amount of rubble was enormous. He couldn't cope alone. Cloud ran to help and, clutching his sword, shouted for everyone to rely on him. The swing of the sword created a powerful gust of air, clearing the space in front of Cloud. He looked at his friend in surprise. Eld sighed and complained that it was worth him leaving for a minute, as they already got into a new story, with a giant bird.
Staring at the sky, Elgid suggested that maybe he should just cut the creature in half. But then he noticed that the bird was acting strangely. Cloud assumed that someone was controlling its mind. And he probably knew who. He decided to find the culprit and instructed Elkenid to help the townspeople. He immediately got to work. Cloud rushed to his brother and sister, begging them to run home and tell their father everything. But the children did not move. They wanted to stay and help. Cloud was puzzled. The younger brother explained that he was aware of the danger, but still wanted to be useful. Cloud was surprised by this answer. He cast aside his surprise and remembered how he himself had said similar words. Placing his hand on his brother's shoulder, he said with a warm smile that the younger one was just like the older one. Then he gave the instructions. Alain was to find the newcomer's companion, and Sally was to urgently go home for her father. The children immediately ran off in different directions. Cloud looked around the square, wondering where the man in the cloak could be hiding. Perhaps he was hiding in one of the carriages nearby. Suddenly, the silhouette of the bird appeared overhead again. The huge rock with a blazing gaze dived straight at Cloud, who was standing at the gate. Somewhere to the side, Sari howled, warning of danger. Cloud, without hesitation, put on his gloves and firmly said that everything would be fine. Waiting for the right moment, he jumped and grabbed the edge of the monster's wing. At that moment, a quiet voice sounded in his head, begging for help. Cloud couldn't believe it. He might have heard the bird rock itself. The voice was talking about meat, control,
and children.
Still clinging to the wing, Cloud realized with astonishment that he could hear her, albeit faintly. Everything around him had slowed, as if in a lingering dream. And now he was almost certain that the man in black was not controlling the bird. He had enslaved it. Cloud suddenly remembered what Kellen had said about how a human couldn't tame a bird as big as Rock. But maybe it wasn't Rock that was being controlled, but the crows that surrounded it in a flock? One of the crows swooped down on him, intending to strike him with its beak. The glove took the blow, but the force of the impact was so great that Cloud was torn off Rock's wing and fell down. And the crow, having knocked him down, flew away with the others. Hanging on another crow, Cloud asked with effort why they were forcing the bird Rock to fight. The voice of the crow in his head answered that it was not their will, but an order from the hands of the tamer of magical beasts. They were only carrying out his orders. Cloud immediately realized that the man in the black cloak was the tamer. If he could be stopped, the flock would stop attacking, and Rock would be free. That was enough. Cloud thanked the crow and let it go. Jumping down, he landed successfully on the awning stretched between the shops. His body went numb from the impact, but he remained unharmed. Jumping up, Cloud looked around the square, looking for the visiting merchant's cart. There was no trace of it, so the merchant had left, but the tamer was still somewhere nearby. A thought flashed through his head. He needed to climb higher. At that moment, he heard a familiar voice. Alain had already climbed one of the towers and was calling him from there, waving his arms. When Cloud called out to his brother, he cheerfully informed him that he had simply gone up the stairs. Cloud blinked, realizing that he had forgotten about such simple solutions. Sitting on top of a tower overlooking the entire square, Alain pointed in the direction. A figure in black was lurking on the roof of one of the buildings. Realizing he had been spotted, the man suddenly jumped up and ran away across the rooftops. Cloud guessed that he must have gotten up there with his gift, which meant the square was in chaos. Birds continued to swoop down, people ran in panic. Cloud called Semeri, Elked, shouting over the noise, told Sipri to accompany the master, while he himself would remain to protect the townspeople. Sipri agreed without hesitation. Having grown big and fluffy, Siri, appropriately and inappropriately, made a cute face and asked what the master wanted. Cloud, smiling slyly, asked to be lifted onto the roof and suggested a walk on the roofs. Siri let out a joyful cry and flew up into the air with enthusiasm, Cloud holding tightly to the back of his neck. They flew easily across the rooftops. The huge white beast made incredible leaps, weaving between chimneys and gables. On one of the roofs, the man in black hoped that he would not be noticed, but at that moment he realized that the white furry beast rushing towards him was none other than Sikratri's demonic dog. Seeing the fugitive, Cloud shouted an order to Siri, "Catch him!" The tamer in the cloak, wasting no time, rushed into a run, zigzagging across the rooftops. Cloud and Siri followed closely behind. Crows flew over the fugitive. Cloud loudly declared that the tamer could not escape. Hearing this, the fugitive looked around in surprise. He did not expect that a child could command demons. After making a sharp jump upwards with the help of the crows, the tamer realized that fighting against the master of Cerberus was madness. He made a decision to split the flock into two parts and hide.